Hello everyone, welcome to Filmcopath. We hope all of you are doing well and keeping safe. The esteemed guest whom we have with us today is considered to be one of the pillars of the alternate aesthetics in Indian cinema. His debut feature film Ankur is a modern masterpiece which introduced Indian viewers to the side of cinema which they had seldom seen. The cinema rooted in real India with real people dealing with real circumstances. Many regard it to be the revival of the alternate cinema movement in India. He has made several award-winning documentaries and movies in his career spanning 5 decades now. He has been decorated with the Dadasaheb Phalke Award and has won the National Award 8 times. Today, we have with us Padma Bhushan, Mr. Shyam Bengal. Thank you, sir, for giving us this unique opportunity to interact with you.
Thank you.
My first question to you about Satyajit Ray is that we want to talk about your association with Satyajit Ray. We have heard you say that there was a time that you used to watch Pather Panchali back to back, even 2 shows in a day. So what was this that attracted you to this film? And also, what was your first experience of watching Pather Panchali?
Well, you see, I was, when the film was released, I was in early college. And I was in Calcutta for, the inter-university swimming competition. I used to represent my university. I think it was either the swimming competition for the inter-university or the nationals, I'm not quite sure. But it was one of those. Because I used to represent my university, I used to represent my state as well as a swimmer. And so I happened to be in Calcutta when Pather Panchali had been released. When it had been released. And then I was staying with an uncle of mine who used to run a commercial arts studio. And they used to do a lot of publicity work for films that were being released in a chain of theaters around Charangi, And so he was, my uncle, knowing my interest in cinema, said, I think you should, since you are here and you're in this swimming competition, you must see a film which is making waves in Calcutta at the moment. And it's very, very, very different from any Indian film you will ever see. So I said, what's the film called? He said, it's a Bengali film called Pather Panchali. And I said, who made this film? So he said, he used to be a commercial artist in an advertising agency called DJ Kemas, and he was an art director there. And he's made this film. I said, how is it different from other films? He said, well, don't ask me all these questions. The film is running in a theater in Bhawanipur. You should go and take a look at it. So I decided I would, my off day, at the competition, that I was in. So I went there to see the film. I think it must have been a weekend, because I went there for an afternoon show. And I went and I got my ticket, went into the theater. I had never expected to see a film that was so different from anything I had ever seen before. Not only different, but so extraordinary in terms of photography. Because I'd never seen an Indian film of that kind. In fact, if anything, I hadn't seen any film like that, of such absolutely wonderful black and white photography. Then the music score, which was outstanding, and the manner in which the characters had been created. Everybody, there was nobody there whose performance was, lacking in any sort of way. And when I saw the film, I was so struck by the film that as soon as the show ended, I went back and bought a ticket to see the film show immediately afterwards. Even after that, then I went third time. That day, I saw the film for matinee show in the afternoon. I saw a 6:30 show, and then I saw a 9:30. So I got back only close to midnight. I was so struck by that film. And I said, my God, if anybody can make a film like this. Because, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I said, this man knows how to make films. So the next day I went back and saw the film again. You know? So I saw the film eventually 8 times. Because at that time, of course, later on I saw it again a couple of times. But the fact was that it had such an incredible impact on me. And it convinced me that, whatever ideas you might have about film, you should just bash on regardless. Work on those ideas. And not worry what film industry is like, what the tradition of filmmaking is like, and so on. And go ahead and make the film you want to make. And that kind of belief that came was because of Pather Panchali. And after seeing that, of course, I said I have to meet Satyajit Ray. I didn't meet him at that time. I met him later, of course. But the fact was that I did go and meet him, And when I met him, of course, it was very interesting because I went to see him. He asked me to come at tea time. I went to meet him at tea time at his home. And then, of course, I started to ask him questions, discuss cinema, and interests were very similar in cinema, and his favorite filmmakers were more or less my favorite filmmakers. So we continued this conversation well until it was dark, until his wife got very upset with me because it was well past his dinner time, and I was taking away all his time, and he was being very polite and not. I wasn't sure because he never asked me to leave. Normally, what would happen is that he would say, correct in that sense, look at his time or something, or to say that, I think call it a day. He never did. Never said any of those things. And because of that, I must have left his home at about 9:30 at night. And I came away, of course, elated. That here I had met probably one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. So it was the extraordinary experience for me. And to find that he was interesting and interesting. See, that was the most important.
One very interesting thing that you mentioned in the documentary you made on Satyajit Ray, where you asked him that there's hardly any informational scene in the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
I mean, as we used to have in Indian cinema, even today we actually have that. So, how did that strike you, and what exactly were you, meaning by that?
No, you see, the fact is that if the cinema, if you're going to have information scenes, why make a film?
Right.
Film is a medium of whatever you wish to say, whatever you wish to inform the audience about. You can do that through the cinema. You don't need to verbalize information. There's no need because it's an audiovisual medium.
Right.
And there's no reason why you should have information scenes. People do that. It's a lazy way of making a film. And you're not making use of the medium and its capability. And so one of the few filmmakers at that time was Satyajit Ray. In fact, he was probably the only one. Before him, there were a couple of filmmakers. For instance, if you look at Pather Panchali, maybe Prabhat, among the Prabhat filmmakers and so forth. But by and large, very, very few. And in Bengali cinema, of course, the people who were doing things more or less contemporaneously with Satyajit Ray was Ritik Khatak, and Mrinal, of course, who also came about the same time. But the fact was that Satyajit Ray had mastered it. You see, he had great mastery over the medium. He knew how to use the medium of film, and how to make things cinematic. And it can only be done through the cinema, not by writing or by speaking, or describing. There's no need to describe. It's already, the description is already in the visual. Right. So there are so many things like that. Now, those are things that Ray was among the first filmmakers in India to do that sort of thing. And the fact that he was doing it made him a unique filmmaker, not just in India, but in the world. But there were filmmakers elsewhere also who used to do that. The only time you can think of is the people we are talking of. You could say that you saw a sequence in Eisenstein or somebody like that, Or you could see somebody like some great John Renoir, for instance. People like that, But he was, in that sense, absolutely among the best. And he knew how to use cinema. He knew how to use that medium. And he mastered it. He was not experimenting with it. He mastered it.
There was also a very interesting section in the documentary you made, sir, where you discuss Ray's music with the man himself. Yeah. Ray is heard to say that he used music to underline the emotion of a scene to make it more accessible to the audience, which he wanted to be cut down and be more economic in the future. So what is your personal idea about the music in cinema and music in Satyajit Ray films?
Well, it's not very different. You see, because you use music as one of the elements of storytelling. It's not there simply to illustrate a scene. By and large, people use music, or used to use. Today, nobody does that, because you see, the film has evolved, television has evolved. This is a constantly evolving medium, But there was a time when people used to feel that they had to underline an emotional character of the film. So they would put music underneath, or they would overpower the scene with music, to make the emotion strong, things like that. So, but you know that if you can do it well, you don't need to add these elements. They're superfluous. And that superfluity gets to be seen. This is the problem. It gets to be, it becomes excessive. It's not the way it should actually be. And so, use of sound, I won't use the word music, use of sound other than speech, as an element that will add to the scene, that will strengthen the scene, that will add contrast to the scene, or that will have a relationship that is ironic, has an ironic relationship. So many things like that. So you can use it as an element, in its own right, as part of the cinema, like with the visual, with the audio part of the film, because the audio part of the film is as important as the visual part of the film. So you should be able to do it like that instead of simply using it to underline the scene. Not you don't use it like a red pencil or blue pencil underneath of your sentence perspective. You don't need to do that. So because the less you do that, the better it is. There's a certain, there's a certain kind of purity to it. So Ray recognized this. I think Ray recognized this more than any other filmmaker, and he did it very, very well, actually. Because when he did Pather Panchali, at that time he himself, I remember once mentioning that I think I put a little more music than I should have in the film. There was probably no need for that sort of thing. But of course, having said that, it is probably one of the most beautiful themes, of cinematic musical themes for a film. That whole musical line that he has, and that which becomes immediately you think of the trilogy. The entire theme of that particular film, which carries on to that because it becomes Opu's theme.
And very interestingly, as you mentioned, like the theme of Pather Panchali, when we start Aparajito, that theme is kind of, not there. And when Opu is coming back in the train to the, village again, that theme comes back. So that's the thing. That is what you are telling, it's just not to be filler. It's to be used in that way so that the narrative enhances.
Part of the narrative. It's part of the narrative, parts of the telling, and part of the entire ethos of the story. So the entire character. Because you see, he made that separation. And also what happens is that when he recollects, when he goes back, when he thinks back, you get this melodic line. When he thinks back of his childhood, when he's growing up,
yes,
all of those things, and all the elements there, his relationships, all of that. So suddenly, because the music has a very important role to play, and I think, as I said, he was one of the few filmmakers who used it with such exceptional sensitivity.
Right, absolutely.
I think you have. I think we have covered most of the questions which we wanted to. I want to put you in a spot of bother, sir. Before letting you go, if I have to ask you, what is your favorite Ray film? What would you choose?
Well, it's in terms of the emotional strength of the film, I would still consider Pather Panchali to be probably the most powerful of his films. But if you think in terms of the overall quality, in terms of perfection, how well constructed the film is, would be Charulata. Because Charulata is complete in every which way.
Right.
Although Pather Panchali itself has a kind of emotional strength and a power that very few of his other films have. They don't have the same kind of strength. But then no filmmakers' films have that. There are one or two films that have that kind of thing. But the manner, I say, where you see the art and craft of Satyajit Ray Charulata is the film you should see.
Mm.
Because that's where the art and craft of the filmmaker himself comes together most brilliantly.
Sir, thank you so much. It was such a surreal experience to actually talk to you in person. It was an honor, sir, to interact with you. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
It was an honor, sir. Yeah.